Do you like memes?
Depends on the meme. Are we talking SpongeBob meme or are we talking actually good meme?
Oh, are SpongeBob memes not good?
I don't like SpongeBob memes.
That makes me feel very old to hear that SpongeBob memes are just not, they're not on the cool list.
Yeah.
Well, I have some trans memes.
And
And
I
they're
love trans memes.
pretty funny. Start with this one at Brennan Beckwith on Twitter. I invited my trans femme friend to a majority trans mask party, and she called it a vegan sausage fest.
Oh, that's good. That is good.
It's funny, just out of happenstance, a lot of these memes that I am finding are trans mask memes, which is great. Trans mask power.
You know, I love it. Like, I think that overall, when we talk about like trans issues and stuff, the focus is too often on trans women, which is just a further sign of the patriarchy in my eyes.
The focus of transphobes is almost exclusively on trans women, so...
But I just, you know, I want to see some more trans mask representation. I have to say, the majority of the people who I know who are trans mask at this point. So get more trans mask representation out. Love
it. Well, here's another one. This is from Tumblr. The user is B-Movie Erotica.
Ooh, this person has taste. We know that.
They like jazz. God, I hate that movie. Okay. When my old professor wrote FTM in giant letters on the board and pointed at it dramatically like, this means everything in economics. And I made eye contact with my one guy friend who was shaking, and everyone else was sitting there stunned or confused for a bit until he said, follow the money.
Female and male means everything in economics.
I knew it. Okay, this one is Twitter user Pamelopith. A girl asked me to carry something for her. Me to myself, this is great. I'm going to get a good grade in man. Something that is both normal to want and possible to achieve.
Amazing. Andre and I always make the joke of like, there's the lesbian urge for me that's like, I gotta carry everything. And then there's the trans mask urge of Andre that's like, I gotta carry everything. And the Venn diagram of that is perfect.
Then you two end up moving a lot of stuff simultaneously.
Yes, we do. For those of you who are trans mask lesbians, I'm sorry, you got stuck with the really heavy end of the stick.
You're lifting cars, like whatever needs lifting. We expect you to do it. Here's a tweet from Life by Pete Moss. Me moves my arm. Dysphoria, but that's how a cis man moves their arm.
I feel this meme on a spiritual level. This meme
that would
speaks
feel
to me.
Familiar for you. This is at Trans Vin Diesel. One time, a friend of mine was at a trans conference. There are trans conferences?
How do I go?
How do you go to a trans conference? Okay, we'll look that one up. At a trans conference, and a well-meaning onlooker asked what it was. When she said something about queer stuff, the person replied, "Oh, I thought it was a conference for short men who love tall women."
Oh, man.
And last one, at Lorne. There are lots of L's before the Lord.
I was going to say, that was a very good, rolling your L.
If you have a truck with balls hanging from it, and your truck wasn't born with balls, and you put the balls on in an elective process, you have a trans truck. Congratulations.
That's true. Truck nuts are trans. Now I feel like I need to get a truck with trans-colored truck nuts just so I can stick it to all the haters.
Trans-colored truck nuts. Oh, crap. I actually have one more. Sorry.
Okay.
This one's short.
One more.
Trans masks need to normalize saying, my dick exploded, when they have a period. It's that time of the month again. Penis explosion? Penis explosion.
Oh my god. I'm Anna, a transgender person.
And I'm Cam, your dad.
And this is The Transgender, a podcast chronicling my transition.
And a cisgender man learning how to support it.
So today I want to talk about pronouns. Tell me what you know about pronouns, just like off the bat. We've had a couple of discussions about this on our podcast. What do you know about pronouns?
Well, here's the funny thing. They're part of our language and how we identify anything at all, but in recent years, because it is more euphoric to have people understand what pronouns to use for you, it has become a symbol of liberal wokeism in the eyes of conservatives that we talk about pronouns, that we use pronouns.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many pronouns that transphobes will just constantly use in their arguments. Like, I don't support you if you use pronouns in your bio. And it's like,
or
okay,
they and their are, plural. And it's like, so what would you call them, singular, if you didn't know what their name was? Like, come on.
God, it's ridiculous. So we all talk about, like, the three, I would say, primary pronouns. I almost said hormones. The three primary hormones that everybody lists in their bios. No.
Yeah, hey, that's the new trend. Everybody list your hormones in your bio. We want to know.
E. So I like to put pronouns in my, like, everywhere. Like, I will have a pronoun pin on basically every article of clothing that I own. But a lot of them only have the three main ones, are she, her, he, him, and they, them, right? And I have pronouns that are not she, her, he, him, or they, them in my identity.
You have
it's crazy.
Neo-pronouns?
I've got neo-pronouns. Something that the neo-Nazis will hate.
Or like Neo from The Matrix, which is a trans allegory. So...
Yeah. Neo is probably trans. We know that, right? I mean,
that's right.
Okay, off topic. So I use Fae and Fair, Fae, Fair, Fairs, as like my identity. Like, that's part of who I am, and that's my non-binary identity. And I really don't actually like she, her that much. Or not she, her, God. They, them. I don't really like they, them that much. I do like she, her. Please keep using she, her for me. I do enjoy that. No, I don't really like they, that much. But I really, like, found my neo pronoun in Fae, Fair, and so I list that everywhere. How often do people use Fae, Fair for me? My father.
Well, this is just a discussion we were having yesterday, because your father, who knows what all your pronouns are, have maybe only referred to you as Fae, Fair twice ever.
Yeah.
And generally it's in a context of me introducing you to someone else, making sure that I'm including all of your recognized pronouns. But when I talk about you to other people, I tend not to use, I don't use them. And in conversation together, I also tend not to use them. So, and that is the difficult thing that I'm finding is it takes a lot of practice to build all these things into your normal practice of speech.
It really does. No, and I will say that I think that neo-pronouns especially are a bit harder for people to tack onto somebody's list of pronouns. Like, I've seen so many people who are like she, they, he, they, like they, he, or like they, him, or something like that, and I love it, and we should continue to do it. But it's so much easier for people, especially if they're already learning or already have learned how to use they, them pronouns for people, to just take that in and be like, oh, well, I'm going to just, I'll interchangeably try and use them both. Or I'll just focus on one, which is kind of the main topic that I want to discuss, which is people tend to just pick one pronoun out of the bunch and be like, this is the pronoun for you. I've decided I'm taking this pronoun and I'm using it for you. And I don't think that there's ill intent there. I just think that it's misguided.
For sure it is. But we've also been societally trained in language development to do that. That's again, if we're talking about, whatever has been normalized, rightfully or wrongfully, in our society, we generally go back to someone having a single set of pronouns that they use. And so it's certainly, I think we're wired in some ways to want to try to talk about people that way. And I think we're talking fully about English here. I really cannot speak for how pronouns work in other languages. We're really sticking to our experience as English speakers.
Yeah, I know just from my little bit of foreign language knowledge they typically handle pronouns and gender in a whole different way in their languages than we do. English is just messed up for so many reasons.
But I will say this, one thing that we don't have in English is, well, I shouldn't say we don't have, but one thing that a lot of languages do have is gendered words in their language that requires you to know what particular gender, or I shouldn't even say that, masculine or feminine is typically how it's referred.
Yeah, we both speak a little bit of German, and in German, there are the three genders. I'm going to put that in quotes. There's the feminine, the masculine, and the non-binary, basically. And so when we're talking specifically about English, I'm going back to English here. People will just say oh, well, you use they, them, and she, her. Well, I'll just focus on the they, them. Or hey, you use she, that you, oh my God. You use she, her too? Well, I'm going to focus just on the she, her. That's what I'm used to. That's what I want to use for you. I see you as a more feminine person. I see you as a more non-binary person, and, whatever. And I really want to normalize using all pronouns in conversation and just switching interchangeably. For me, when talking about myself or something like that, will be oh yeah, Anna, what a crazy fae she is, or what a crazy fair is, and oh, she's got this crazy haircut or something like that. Just trying to incorporate them into other conversation. And it's been something that I've really been trying to have the people around me also start to do. So Andre, my partner and our researcher, has been really good about utilizing fair talking about me and talking about me to other people around me, especially. And I think that's really cool. And it's something that takes practice, but you're already practicing pronouns.
Right. You're already practicing pronouns. And especially if you knew somebody, I heard the term dead gender the other day. If you knew somebody with their dead gender and, are trying to learn a new set of pronouns from that. I would love to know, and I'm sure our listeners would as well, what is it that drew you to fair pronouns, and how is that meaningful to you as usage, as opposed to she, her?
Looking for positivity within our community? Then listen to Queer We Are, the podcast where you hear some of the most interesting and successful LGBTQ plus people share uplifting stories, including their definition of success, how they achieved it, and what they learned along the way. Guests include celebrities, activists, politicians, athletes, and many more. Click the link in the show notes and check us out, or go to queerweare.com. If you've been looking for both fun and inspiration, now you know where to find us. Queer We Are.
That is such an interesting question, because it's a question that I get asked quite frequently, and it's not easy to explain. It's how are you drawn to your gender? How do you know that you are a man? How do you know that you are a woman? How do you know that you're non-binary? And, I always knew that there was some part of my identity that was non-binary. I remember from a very young age saying oh, well, I'm a demigirl. I'm mainly she, her, but I have this non-binary part, and just use she, her for me. I don't really like they, them. And that, that was working fine, but it wasn't speaking to who I really was. So I guess what really drew me into the fair part of that is I just looked up neopronouns, and we're going through lists and being no, poison doesn't really work for me, poison, poisonous, poisonous, or something like that. And I'm these feel like joke pronouns. And I realize that they're made by trans people who are really trying to describe their identity. But when we start looking towards the more, I don't want to say accepted neopronouns, because I wouldn't say that neopronouns in general are accepted, but the ones that match a little bit easier with the way that we speak in English, like fair or fays or fem. I'm trying to think of a couple of other ones, other neopronouns.
Well, I was just thinking, this is not, the Z.
Yeah, Zzier.
Yeah, and those would be, I think, the examples that I would think of when I think of more Again, it's so hard to say some of the language of that. I was going to say socially accepted. It's not still socially accepted, but seems more familiar, especially if you've been around the queer community for a while, that, you might have seen a Z-Sim or a Zexir. One thing that I was thinking about was an individual on the TransSpeak server who used Nyan as their pronoun. And that has felt not super unusual in the online trans community. Certainly trans Twitter, there's a lot of folks that use Nyan or really cat identity, parts of how just to feel more euphoric in their identity that way too. So
yes, the trans community, the bunch of furries. Just kidding.
Just those kidding. Specific ones.
I'm just kidding too. I love the Nyan personality. I love the Nyan, the Nyan gender. Like you do you. Whatever your identity is, I support you. I love you. I just, again, they're different. That is the entire thing. It's like to me, as someone who has faced the you identify as she, her, I identify as a TAC helicopter from transphobes.
Right.
Like to me, my experience is I am trained to see that as a different and bad thing, whereas it's not. It's somebody's
we all are. I mean,
that's pronoun. Yeah,
that's the thing that society has done to us. Is again, this is where we're even. I hear you saying that even as a trans person, there are certain parts that are societally ingrained in us that we're still trying to learn and grow out of, and that's I think really important.
Yeah. So I guess we're going back to the original question that started this whole side tangent is why did I choose Faye Fair? And it's kind of like Faye Fair chose me. But what I will say is that the symbolic meaning of Faye Fair in specific, and opposed to like something like Faye Femme or Faye Fim, something like that that's in a similar vein, is I am a witch and I like fairies, and I kind of see myself in a very similar way to a fairy. And so, the original name of fairy is Faye or Fairy, Faery. And I just kind of adopted that and said, hey, that works for me. Faye, Fair pronouns, I'll use those. So I guess that's kind of why I use those. And really, I just wanted to say to anybody who has somebody in their life who uses neopronouns or who has multiple pronouns, and your instinct is to just, stick to one set for them or to focus in on one and, use the other ones maybe occasionally, throw them up, just like throw them into a hat. And every time you bring them up, pull one out of the hat and be like, oh, today we're using, or like this time I'm using she, her, or this time I'm using Faye, Fair. And slowly, every time that you talk about them, you'll just start to instinctively use both of them. And as somebody who uses neopronouns, it still takes me time to think about them for myself. Like, I immediately go she, her for me. And then I'm like, hold on, that's not just it, though. Like, that doesn't describe my whole identity. And I think that that's really the whole point of neopronouns, is describing somebody's whole identity in a way that is easier for other people to interact with. Absolutely.
Well, and two, I want to make sure that people are feeling that euphoria from being able to find ways to describe themselves too. So from the ally side or from the person who's supporting these pronouns, I think that's really important. I'm thinking specifically of an example of a mutual friend of ours who has been trying to use they more often. And, it's just practice. As long as you've known somebody, even if they are still keeping another set of pronouns that you're used to using, it's really important that if they've said, hey, there's another set of pronouns, this would make me feel more euphoric if you decided to use these more often. That can be extremely helpful for you to just practice. And as you say, sprinkle into conversation and make it something that's, if they're a priority to you, then their identity should be a priority to you too.
And, I myself, and I know so many other people will like beat themselves up about pronoun usage. Like, oh shoot, like this is a trans man and I just misgendered them or something like that. Think of it in a similar way of like, I don't ever recommend like beating yourself up over, misusing pronouns, especially if you catch it and you correct it. Like that is what you want to be doing. You just want to acknowledge it. You want to correct it and you want to, move on with the conversation. But I want you all to start thinking about those for additional pronouns as well. I want you to think, hey, this person uses she, they, for example. I am going to, I can see them as a feminine person and I can be like, okay, she, her, got it. They, them. How do I, even if it's just today I'm choosing they, them pronouns exclusively for this person to work into my dictionary of pronouns for them, that's fine. It's just you want to slowly make sure that you're incorporating both of their pronouns and all of their identity into the person that you are describing. And so really all I want to say is don't forget about the additional pronouns and just keep working towards, helping people find their full identity.
Okay, I will. Oh, wait, you meant our listeners too. Yes.
I meant our listeners. You too, though. You too. I mean, really, come on. Gotta get on that.
Man, I'm working on it for sure. For our main topic, I know that you want to talk about your mental health, and I just wanted to point out again to our listeners that if you haven't already, we have a Transgender Presents of Anna's mental health crisis and the live stream that she did. It's really well worth a listen because it really goes deep into dark points in your experience that you had. But today, you want to talk about something a little different, and I'm excited to hear you tell us about this.
Yeah, so I really recommend listening to the mental health journey if you are in a place that is ready to hear it, if you're in a place that is able to hear it. Just so everybody knows, this was a live stream that I did on YouTube that was recorded in March of 2022. So, I've gotten so many messages of people who are in my life checking in, making sure that I'm okay. I really appreciate it. And I love you all. And I want you to keep doing that. And I want to keep checking in with all of you too. But do not worry, too much about me right now. This was months ago. This was, I've moved on from this crisis. And so, to all of you who did send me messages, thank you so much. I love you. Trans identity and mental health are interconnected in a way that I think is good and bad. And I just want to start off and give you a little bit of information, my father and our listeners. So, gender identity disorder, which is sort of what dysphoria falls under in the DSM-5, which is the mental health diagnostic material or diagnostic criteria manual for mental health providers, it is a diagnosis that people can have, is gender identity disorder. It's actually a diagnosis that I myself have. And if you feel like it is a diagnosis that would help you, talk to your providers. It's not something that will fit everybody, and it's not going to be helpful to everybody. I just want to come out there and say that right away, of it can have impacts on your life just like any other diagnosis can. For me, it's been really helpful in being able to get the specific kind of care that I want in a much more expedited fashion than I might otherwise have been able to. So, gender identity disorder in the DSM-5. It is a mental health condition, which I hate to say, but it is. And that is part of the reason why we have to talk to therapists, and we have to do all these things that I would say are ridiculous, but also get us into the healthcare system in a way that is really engaging and helpful to those of us who do deal with the additional things that come with mental health and mental illness. Trans people are more likely to experience other mental health issues than the general population. And I would say that is probably a little bit elevated because of the fact that trans people are more likely to go to therapy and are more likely to get diagnosed with other things in therapy than, say, a white cis man who, has gone to therapy 3 times in his life and doesn't, hasn't really opened up to any specific therapist. We are, as trans people, we are 6 times more likely to have a mood or anxiety disorder than the general population, which makes sense as well, just that kind of elevated likelihood. And we're 3 times as likely to be prescribed antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication.
Right. Wait, now that's an interesting set of statistics, because 6 times more likely to have a mood disorder, but only 3 times more likely to have a prescription for antidepressants, which is, I just find that interesting.
It is interesting. No, and I think that is a good sign of where we are going with healthcare, which is medications don't do everything for you. You still need to go to therapy. You still need to work on things. And so really what medications are trying to do is help alleviate some of the symptoms that are making it impossible for you to do the things to take care of yourself, and allow you to go to therapy and do the more helpful things that you can do. Trans people who are listening, this statistic will not surprise you. And anybody who has listened to our podcast, this statistic should not surprise you. Trans people are 6 times as likely to attempt suicide, resulting in hospitalization. It is a sad statistic and something that we really do need to talk about and be present for and support everyone. Trans Day of Remembrance is coming up November 20th. If you have a trans person who you've lost, if you know anybody who is trans, who has committed suicide, please, please, please make sure that you have November 20th marked on your calendar. Do whatever it is you do to, honor life, celebrate life, whatever your tradition is. And to anybody who has lost someone, please know that, you are loved and you love these people. And to any trans person who is going through this, you're not alone. And there's always going to be help and there's always going to be love for you. Heavy stuff out of the way.
Is it out of the way? I think part of where we've had discussions in the past about mental health and being trans, and the Venn diagram that is those things is a little bit of how those statistics are used against trans folks by transphobes who want to say this is a mental disorder. If you got the right kind of help and treatment, then, you wouldn't be trans.
Exactly. It's not how that works. Mental health and trans identity are 2 extremely different things. They are interconnected and they can influence each other. Well, I shouldn't even say that. Being trans can definitely influence your mental health, but I assure you that mental health does not influence you being trans. And I shouldn't even say necessarily that being trans influences your mental health. It's the symptoms of gender dysphoria, societal expectations, all these other things that come together. My trans identity has absolutely nothing to do with mental health. It's everything else that gets piled onto my trans identity that then becomes intermixed with my mental health. Both social and medical transitions improve other aspects of mental health in people who are trans, who experience gender dysphoria, and are not mutually exclusive. You can have a social transition and alleviate all the symptoms that you're feeling. You can socially transition, feel like it's not doing anything, and then go the medical transition route and have those symptoms start to alleviate themselves too. There's no one size fits all solution to being trans. So, make sure that you're doing what works for you with your mental health and what your providers are trying to help you work towards too. It is really important that you are working with providers who know how to deal with trans people. And by deal with, I mean, actually care about you as a person and as your identity, and isn't just saying, hey, you're trans, I'm going to pawn you off on somebody else. With the alleviation of symptoms also comes a betterment in all of mental health. And, we were kind of talking about that with, if you take transition steps, your mental health will improve in other aspects. The consensus among many mental health professionals is that the mental health issues are due to larger societal views and not inherent to being trans. So kind of what we were talking about before.
What you were just saying, exactly.
Yeah, they are intertwined, but also very different. And then a study of trans youth showed a 60% decrease in depression and a 73% decrease in suicidality in trans youth who have access to transition after 1 year.
Yeah. And those are amazing statistics. I mean, again, transition healthcare saves lives. It literally does.
It really does. I mean, look at just the statistics that we've thrown at you right now. Trans people are 6 times more likely to be hospitalized due to a suicide attempt. 1 year after transition, suicidal teens who are trans and have been able to transition drop down 73%. That brings us almost back in line with the normal statistics for cisgender,
right, suicidal ideation in general. Yes.
Yeah, which is insane. Transitioning literally will save lives, and it can not only save trans lives, but think about all of the other repercussions that come with losing someone. It is a community-wide thing that needs to be talked about and needs to be worked on. Please, if you at all have any questions about transitioning, or you are a parent, listen to our goddamn podcast and just hear us when we say, do what makes your trans person happy and make sure that they are safe and okay. Moving on from sort of the general population, I want to move into a more personal side of my own mental health and kind of the whole inspiration behind this episode, and something that I've kind of been wanting to talk about for a while now, but just haven't really figured out the correct way. So I, Anna, am the host of a system. I was diagnosed with D.I.D, which is dissociative identity disorder. Formerly, it was known as multiple personality disorder, though I really don't like that terminology. It is outdated and has very bad connotations to it. And I am going to be honest, I am terrified to put this all out on the internet and say, hey, I have D.I.D and I have things that make it really hard for me to live my daily life, and I am not alone in my body, which is an insane thing to think about and say, even for somebody who has gone through it and is going through it. And so I really wanted to bring this whole episode of mental health and trans topics together to say, I am a person with D.I.D. I'm the host of a system. I wanted to say flat out, D.I.D has nothing to do with my trans identity. I am a trans woman in a system of people, in a single body, right? I have experienced a lot of trauma in my life, and my brain decided to create other people, basically what we call alters, to store those memories. And I want to just be 100% here. This has nothing to do with me being trans, other than the things that we have previously talked about of trans people being more likely to experience trauma and abuse and things like that.
And these being important aspects of who you are as a person, too. It's,
yes.
Without everything being defining, definitions of what you are is all part of who you are. And I think it's important for you to share. You have a lot of people listening that care about you. And this is important information for them to know, not only in their support of you, but also as you're thinking about how we relate to people in the world. In general, you have met trans people, you have met people with D.I.D and all kinds of different mental health issues in their world, and having some kind of understanding that can help everybody, the person with D.I.D or as the person who is unaware but meeting folks in the world. I just think you're a good example of, this is a reality for some folks, and this is a reality for you, and it's important for us to understand that.
And, another thing that I really want to say about D.I.D in specific is we are a lot more common than you would think. The statistics say that there are every 1 out of 100 people in the U.S. potentially has D.I.D. I went to a high school of 300 people. That means that 3 of us, statistically, in my high school at any given time, had D.I.D and have D.I.D.
Well, I think it's very brave of you to share, like so many things in this podcast. And I really do. I mean, I think there's more episodes coming up in the future here where we want to discuss mental health more, and we'd like to get some mental health professionals involved so that we can continue to have these discussions and continue to share our knowledge about this, because it's extremely important to keeping people euphoric and alive and living their best lives. And so I'm proud of you for sharing, and I'm proud of you for for working on it and through it, and finding ways to make your life better, knowing that you're having to struggle with some things like D.I.D. Anna, do you have a gender euphoria for us?
You fucking bet I do. I want to share the euphoria that I had. It's not exactly this week, but it was late last week, so it's basically this week. Late last week, I got a haircut by some lovely people in Duluth. Deep Cuts is amazing. If you are in the Twin Ports area, please go check out Deep Cuts. They are amazing.
As far as they know, they're the only trans-owned barber shop, specifically, at least in Minnesota. They're absolutely phenomenal. She is a trained barber, but she also has 2 other staff that work there that are both really talented hair stylist professionals.
Yeah, so I went to Brandy and I got my hair cut like cut styled. It was amazing. I had the curliest, most amazing hair I think I've had in a while. And I just wanted to say I love my new haircut. I've got like shortcut bangs that I can work with to like swoop to one side or the other side, and it looks good. And so, it's something that I can experiment with, and I really like it. It's made me feel euphoric, and I just wanted to share that with all of you.
I love that. You've had long hair for a very long time, and I really like what Brandy did with your hair, just to
It's so good.
Give you good styling options. If you haven't listened to our podcast where we have B on, go back a couple episodes from this one, and you will be able to listen to B talk about her trans experience and also being a barber and owning her own business. So
I believe that episode title is The Island of Misfit Toys, if you are at all interested.
If you have questions about transitioning or supporting someone who is transitioning and you'd like us to talk about it on the show, please shoot an email to questions@transgendapod.com, click on the chat with us button on our website, or DM us on social media. If you'd like to support the show, you can become a patron on our Patreon.
Shout out this week to our patron, Nomi, who is at our Backstage Pass plus Sticker Club level, and to all of the patrons who joined us and are joining us now live with our Backstage Pass.
We'll be doing these monthly, so watch our Patreon page.
Yes. Be sure to check out our episode description for links to resources on today's topics, especially some statistics and resources on trans mental health and just mental health care in general.
Thanks for listening. I've been Cam.
I've been Anna.
And this has been The Transgender.
Love you all, except the bigots.
Would you like to support our podcast? Well, you're in luck. We have a Patreon now. Just visit patreon.com/transgendapod, and for as little as $3 a month, you can support the content that we're creating. And for $20 a month, you can join our Sticker Club, which provides you with a monthly live stream, a shout out on the podcast, and a sticker every month from ourselves and creators that we adore. Again, just visit patreon.com/transgendapod, and thank you for all your support.